Hi there, viewers. Today I'm joining a conversation with author Nate J. Porter, the author of the crime thriller novel titled Karman. It's a pleasure to have Nate on the show. Welcome on the show, Nate.
Thank you, Peter. I definitely appreciate it. I've been looking for this for probably about a week now. Again, I've been really impressed with a lot of your interviews with other authors for the past few months, and so yeah, I'm really excited about being on your show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. Nate, I'm first impressed by your title, which is titled Karma, because this is something that I've always loved to talk about, because it conveys the reality of the fact that whatever you do to other would come back to you, or that you would reap whatsoever you sow. And I'm curious to know how you come about writing the novel and even coming up with the concept of titling it Karma. I want to ask you, what inspired this book?
Uh, I would say it's twofold. One of it is, of course, when I started writing this book back in 2011, it was geared, or at least I guess you can say it was inspired by a lot of the news reports regarding bullying and how so many people had been affected and um, them, taking their own lives basically because of the hardship that they were experiencing.
Hmm.
Uh, and the other part of this was I wanted to write a story in reflection to my experience of bullying, mainly when I was enlisted in the military. I recall, or still can recall, one individual in particular who used to harass me for whatever reason was on his mind. Uh, and I just remember at one point, it just got to a point where I was fed up, and I literally almost went and did some harm to him while he was going to go ahead and go to sleep. Uh, it took me a lot of prayer and a lot of patience to let my frustration, my anger subside, um, so I wouldn't wind up doing anything bad to him. But in regards to my story here, again, I wanted to write something about my experience, but I felt people may not really be too interested in reading about my history per se. So I figured, well, why not make this more of a story regarding someone, someone fictional, and but have it portray, you know, how that person would feel if they still had this type of aggression and frustration and oppression, and they found a way of actually seeking revenge. So those two instances, the news reports and my experience of bullying, were definitely the focal points of what led me to start writing a story.
Wow, that's quite an experience. That's very deep to me. And that's quite fun to know that that's actually what inspired your book. It's very fascinating to know. Now, I also want to ask
Thank
you,
you.
for readers like me who haven't read the book yet, without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect picking up Karman?
Um, I would say with my storyline, I'm not sure how other people normally write thrillers, but me, I wanted to make sure that I was very detailed as far as what to expect as far as growing up and seeing movies as such, like for
Mm.
instance, the movie Freddy Krueger. Nightmare on Elm Street was a great a horror classic that provided great details of their crime scenes and things as such, and I always found that fascinating. So I encompassed that in my storyline. uh, in addition to that, I also wanted to ensure that people understood how each character felt during the time that they were, um, I guess, being attacked, during the time that the incidents were happening. Um, and I also wanted to also add I guess you can say the relationships for some of the characters, such as the detective and his wife and his partner. Um, the relationship with the staff members at the psychiatric center, the relationship with Carmen and her psychiatrist. I wanted to incorporate all these things because I felt that if when someone reads this story, um, they can get a well-rounded view, a reality view of how I don't know, just how amazing it is for an author to be able to separate themselves from the story and provide such a well-rounded picture for each of the characters. And again, most importantly, the moments that the victims are facing their demise.
Oh, that's quite fun. And now I want to also ask you, is Karman the name of a particular character or is like a title on itself?
Carmen, the way that I was trying to figure out how to, I guess, um, make this, I guess you can say, make the story attractive, um, but not put too much into the title. Um, I had to do some research to try and find out if, in fact, there was a book or story or a movie or anything that
Okay.
already had this title in it. Um, Now, of course, I wouldn't expect for them to have done what I did, but I still wanted to look into that. Um, I
Oh,
found I found books that had the story Karma, um, and of course, it's still rejected on the fact of what you do can come back to you.
yeah.
However, it still didn't reflect how my story was written and projected. So I just went ahead and used Carmen, but that's why I went ahead and highlighted the end for people to just get a quick glimpse of what to expect the story to be about and not overwhelm it with all these other words and basically throwing people off while they're looking at the title. So
Yeah, it's actually fine. And even with that, you said, Karman is a kind of a vast title where quite a lot of people like writing about. Even myself, I have some poem on the theme of Karman. And so you expect to see quite a lot of work with that kind of a title, I'd say. Now, I also want to ask you,
right.
what's your opinion about criticism? How do you react to negative criticism of your book if you've ever had one, or if you eventually have one in the future?
I would say as of right now, this was possibly my third year promoting my novel.
Oh,
I only do it, I would say, seasonally. I normally start around August, going into late October, which is, normally around Halloween time. But since the 3 years that I've started promoting, I really haven't had any negative criticism. A lot of folks who have read my book, of course, family, they're always going to support you regardless of fact. Um, but I have had some professional reviews done. As a matter of fact, I just had a professional review done um, 2 days ago. I just saw it on Instagram.
oh,
Um, but at any rate, majority everyone who has read my book, they have provided a lot of positive feedback. However, if I were to uh, experience any negative criticism or I guess they say constructive criticism,
yeah.
um, to be honest, I would accept it just as I'm accepting the positive criticism.
Oh,
Uh, of course, with positive criticism, there's not really much you really need to do. Um, I mean, maybe there's a few, hey, how about this next time, yada yada, so on and so forth. But it's not really much that you really have to take into account and consider for the next book that you write. Um, but when it comes to negative criticism, then that's when I would actually utilize that and not take it too personal, but just take it as a sense of advice
mm,
for my next book. Therefore, hopefully, my next book, whoever gave me that negative criticism may like what I put in my next book if they decide to read it. So,
Yeah, that's great. That's quite fascinating to know. I'm also curious to know if you experience any challenges while writing Carmen. If there's any, could you share with us and how you ultimately overcame it?
one of the challenges, because this is my first book,
Okay.
one of the challenges I found um, was going from one chapter to the next chapter. Um, some people they may not have a problem with that, and that's most likely because they've probably been writing for years. Me again, being a first time author, the challenge for me going from one chapter to another was how should I go into this next chapter? Should I continue on with what just
Fox.
happened in the previous chapter and then slowly, change the scenario? Or should I just completely change the scenario and just move on to the next thing without really concluding the previous chapter?
Yeah.
Um, it took me, this book took me about 6 years to write, uh,
Wow.
considering that I was working full time while also trying to attend uh, university. Um, so I had more than enough time to actually think, rethink, and re-strategize on the chapters. Now, mind you, if I was pressed with time, then I think it would probably have been a little more challenging because let's
Mm,
face it, um, it's really hard to try and come up with such suggestions or ideas when you got the time ticking behind you. But for me, again, I was able to actually take some time. I would read, reread, and then I would decide for myself um, whether or not, if I were a reader reading this book, would I be content with how the previous chapter ended?
mm,
Using that philosophy, I found that actually beneficial because I actually wound up using both strategies. For some chapters, ending, I began the next chapter going into somewhat going into trying to pretty much, uh, I guess, conclude the chapter before. And then there were other chapters where I decided to actually move forward with the next chapter. But the way that I did it, I would describe like the environment, if it's night, if it's day, the weather, the time, things like that. Just anything to help the reader uh, be able to move on past what just happened in a previous chapter and preparing them for what lies ahead.
yeah, that's a great one. And I'm quite interesting to know that that was a challenge because I can resonate with that very well. I've actually read quite a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of novel that they like take for instance chapter one as a particular character that talked about, then the chapter two would continue from the fourth chapter and go on
mm-hmm.
and on to the third to the fourth. And the other way around, I've also read some other novel whereby chapter one would talk about a particular character and
Right,
chapter two would talk about another character. And chapter three would introduce you again to the continuation of the first character in the first chapter. And chapter
right,
four will introduce you to the continuation of the second character in the second chapter. And that's how they keep switching it from the first to the third, from the second to the fourth, from the third to the sixth. That's they keep switching it one and all. And I always love such kind of book. And I even took it over myself to utilize some sort of method in my on over them, right? And I've read quite a lot of books like that, and I've read other ones that has a continuation of characters moving all the way, which is quite fun to me. I know sometimes we authors can somehow want to imagine if this is a nice style to use, if readers will be able to understand this, if readers will be able to go with this. But most time doing it in a nice manner sometimes could intrigue the interest of readers out there.
right. And I'm glad you mentioned that
Yeah,
in regards to the introduction of characters.
yeah.
Um, I think one of the things uh, that some of the readers actually appreciate about my storyline is Carmen. I don't bring Carmen into the story until about 8 chapters in.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
So
actually amazing, and that's amazing and inspiring. Because sorry to bring this in, the novel that I'm writing, I think it turned out to come in after, I think after the fifth chapter. That's when I now start talking about
right,
the bet of the person who's the novel itself is about. So
right, exactly.
writing can be very, you can do it anyhow, do change your style, whatever you want to do.
Right. And then I'm sure again once your readers start reading your story, uh, I feel that they too would actually appreciate the I know they I guess they consider that being prolonged, but they actually would appreciate that because again you're not just jumping out and going right into the character and revealing all that that this character has or is dealing with. It's
Right.
something that they have to wait for.
Hmm.
And once they do finally get to that moment where they're, oh, okay, now he brought this character in,
Hmm.
there's a lot of other things that have already transpired for the reader to now be able to accept this character into the story.
Your novel sounds very interesting, very, very interesting, and I can discern that from this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah. I also know that your novel is a crime thriller. It's a crime thriller novel, and this has been a genre that I love so much. And as a crime thriller writer, I
Yeah.
was going to ask about what interests you most about crime thrillers.
Uh, Throughout my whole life, I've always been interested in crime thrilling stories.
Hmm.
For instance, growing up, or I would say as a child, um, the books that have always intrigued me the most were stories from like the late Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock just had a unique way of being able to bring his stories, his absolute amazing eccentric temperament. I don't even know how he even thought of half of those stories.
Hmm.
I mean, some of them might be ideas of others, of course. But I do believe that majority of his stories, or um, that he sponsored and produced, came from him. And watching his shows, there's a few other Arthurs out there as well, like Wes Craven. Um, who else? Wes Craven is another, but there's quite a few, and I've always been intrigued with the storylines, how they unfolded, um, and most importantly, how the stories ended. Um, it's always been very impressive to me to see, um, you know, uh, horror fiction, thrilling or thriller stories such as those.
Wow, that's nice. That's quite nice to hear. And I also want to ask you, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? What are the challenges that you've encountered in terms of marketing your book? And what are the mediums you've utilized so far in terms of promoting Karman?
Uh, when I after I first finished my novel,
Yeah,
because again this is my first novel,
yeah.
um, I thought that going through an actual publishing company would be idea because again they've been doing this for only God knows how long, so they pretty much have all the essentials of getting my book
Okay.
processed, uh, printed, and and promoted basically.
Hmm.
However, I also decided to seek out like some printing companies. And the one printing company that I did speak with, they actually have they have a very good rating in regards to helping self-publishers, get themselves off the ground. In addition to that, they've also provided me resources in regards to individuals that can help with the cover of the book, editing, um,
Mm.
web design. Um, I mean, you name it, they had the resources already ready for you. You just had to you just had to be ready to, of course, do the work. And I believe that's the difference between a publisher and self-publishing. The publisher
Mm.
does all the work. The challenge that, oh, I don't want to say the challenge, but the difficult decision of choosing a publisher versus doing it yourself is you benefiting from or profiting from your novel. Now, mind you, publishers will do basically all the work,
Yeah.
but they're also going to do their share. Um, So for me, I decided that instead of trying to seek a publisher and not knowing which one would be the best choice, and more importantly, I mean, my book is something that it seems to pull in a lot of readers. So I figured, well, let me just do my self-publishing. Let me do the self-publishing thing and see how that works out. And so what I've decided to do was I had flyers created, and on the back of the flyers actually provided chapter one, which it worked out perfectly because chapter one is small enough to be put on the back of a flyer. So
Mm.
in addition to me handing out flyers, I, expressed to anybody that may be of interest that you can check out chapter one right here and right now to determine whether or not you actually want a book. In addition to that, I've had bookmarks made. Um, as you can see right behind me, I have a poster board that's been made. I actually have another poster board.
Oh.
Um, in addition to these idea promoting tools, I decided to also have t-shirts made.
Mm.
So the
Beautiful.
t-shirts, again, just as I'm wearing the black one,
Yeah.
I've had t-shirts made where anyone that purchases a paperback, not only do they get a signed autograph or copy, they also get a free t-shirt to come with it.
Oh,
So that's my additional incentive for anybody that purchases a paperback um, versus the ebook version.
that's beautiful. You've got quite a lot of nice method out there, which is quite
Yes,
fascinating
sir.
to me.
Amen. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I just want to ask you, is there anything that you love to, share with the viewers about your book that we couldn't touch in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know?
Oh yeah. One of the things that I found a lot of readers appreciate is the fact that my novel is very easy to read.
Mm.
I didn't use a lot of difficult wordings. It's something that again people can relate to because again it's about bullying, and I'm sure if if no one's never really experienced bullying, they may have probably bullied someone in the past. Or even if they haven't, and bullying has never been uh, any issue in their life, it's still a story that they can relate to
Absolutely.
and they could actually follow along with because again,
Yeah.
uh, it's a story that shadows a detective working a crime scene. Everybody or majority of people who enjoy reading enjoy a good crime thriller. So,
Mm.
in addition to that, my book is actually I wrote this book to be suitable for teens as well as adults. And teens by um, do I use explicit language? I have, but I've made sure that I guess you can say blurt it out a bit, not fully writing it out, but when people read it, they understand what the character is saying. It's just not written completely out. So, um, those are the two things that I think a lot of readers actually appreciate. Again, is the fact that it's an easy read and it to adulthood.
Wow. That's quite great to know. Now, I also want to ask you, as a
Okay.
published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with producing a book like yours? What would you tell people in this category?
the one advice that I definitely like to encourage a lot of writers, especially those that are experiencing challenges with trying to finish their book, uh, to try and pace yourself, give yourself some time, uh, allow your mind to be able to come up with different ways or better ways of either introducing a chapter,
Mm,
or fulfilling that chapter, or concluding that chapter. Don't rush, because when you rush, in my opinion, uh, it's almost like setting yourself up for regret. Because
mm,
once you finish your book and you start reading through your chapters, if you decide to, reread your work before you publish it, you may find yourself second guessing or starting to doubt your work, and wishing to either rewrite or reorganize your writing. So definitely take your time. This way, once you're finished, you know you're done. And
mm.
I say this out of an example, or um, from I say this from my experience,
Wow.
because that's what I use writing this book. Um, this book is well over 500 pages,
Crazy.
um, and it's up to about 28 chapters. Now,
Wow.
mind you, that's a lot of work. That's
Absolutely.
that's that's adding a lot of detail to a story, versus just rushing it through. But that's what actually helped me, per each chapter, was again taking my time, figuring out how to best explain that chapter, what I felt I could add to the chapter, or if I was pretty much done. And I kid you not, at the end of each chapter, I literally felt like I had no more to give for that chapter. And that's when I decided to move on to the next chapter, when I felt there was really nothing else to add to it. And so that's what I'm recommending, and encouraging a lot of authors who may be struggling, trying to continue their book. Give yourself some time, try to rethink what you just wrote, um, and don't move on until you're absolutely 100% content.
That's a great one. That's a great advice. And I'm open and sure that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize that advice too. Where can we get a copy of your book? Could you tell us where readers and viewers can get a copy of your book?
You can visit my website. My website is www.njporter.carmen.com. That website will actually take you to it will take you to the link, that provides you, it'll give you three different tabs.
Okay.
One of the tabs is for Barnes and Nobles. The other tab is for Amazon, and both of those tabs are for my ebook version.
Okay.
Then there's an additional tab, that is stated, um, purchase through Arthur. If you click on that tab will send you to my PayPal link, which would be directed to me. And once you purchase the link, then I get, of course, the notification, and then I just do my part by signing the book, of course, packaging that up along with the free T-shirt, and
Mhm.
mailing that out to whichever address is on the PayPal link.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's quite amazing. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Nate, for coming on the show and for talking about your book, Carmen. I left a link in the description part of this interview to his website and to the other purchase platform. It's a pleasure to have Nate on the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, yes, sir. Well, I definitely appreciate again you reaching out to me, setting up this interview. Again, I find your work truly amazing, and it's definitely, I feel a lot of pride and support from being on your show. So, thank you, and definitely keep up the great work.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for the compliment.
Yes, sir.